production is low, however, the cost to the consumer is high. I mean, this logic doesn't make sense to me. I've seen this report from Forbes itself. Now, let us come back to the cost of this manufactured crisis for profit.
Yes.
I think the Canadian writer, one of them, says, today we have disaster capitalism.
Yes.
So you create a disaster and you profit from it.
Absolutely.
This is what has happened here.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is disaster capitalism.
Absolutely.
Now, the cost, you're already saying we pay more than we should.
Absolutely.
But is it true to describe the IPPs as the biggest corrupt activity that has happened since 1994?
It is absolutely correct. The Independent Power Producer Program, it is the most corrupt scheme that has ever been enacted upon the people of this land, who are going to feel it for many more years to come, with energy poverty, inability to afford electricity, therefore they cannot access it. They have to resort to other things. Their dignity is going to be impaired. But those that can afford, most of their income is going to go towards now ensuring that they can get whatever electricity. Whereas the people who are building this so-called independent power producer power plants, they are going to profiteer beyond anything. If you look at it, think of it this way. If I came to you and said, invest 20 rand, but if you invest 20 rand, I will give you 1,400 rand in return. Why would you not invest? Of course you will invest. You say, if I have got such guarantee, because what did we do? Unlike other countries, we have said, they have a thing called a pass-through. Pass-through meaning it comes to you as the consumer. How do we see that? It means that these guys, they built whatever power station which only produces electricity on a clear day or on a windy time if it's by the coast. But if it's solar, there has to be clear day with certain level of the sun rays at a particular temperature. So in a day like today, there's very little electricity that is coming from the solar plants into the grid. But also, in South Africa, households, you and I at home, what time do we need electricity? We need electricity in the evening to be able to cook a meal for our family, to be able to have the lights on, and to be able to watch television, and then to be able to have hot water for bathing in the morning.
So the time when you have the highest demand, they can't generate.
They cannot generate, and yet they have been paid. So why is it the biggest fraud? Why is it the biggest looting, the biggest theft that has ever been enacted upon the people of this land? Is that this year alone, up till the 31st of March 2019, in terms of the financial year, Eskom is going to collect money from you and I and pay 34 billion rand of that money to these independent power producers, who will not have given more than 5% of the electricity that is supplied by Eskom. But that 34 billion rand will constitute 30% of the cost to Eskom, which it costs Eskom to produce electricity. So that 34 billion is guaranteed to these people, these privateers, is guaranteed to them for the next 20 years. So whether or not the costs are even coming down, it is no factor. It is for that reason, by the way, that I have challenged any one of them to produce or to make available to the public, disclose their power purchase agreements that they have signed, which guarantees them profits over the next 20 years. If we look at the guys that are running taxis, we are here by Gandhi Square. It's one of the biggest terminals in the country. The guys that are running taxis here are not guaranteed a tariff.
That's right.
Or a fare that they will collect. So if you are buying a microbus, you buy it at your own risk. Yeah. Nobody's guaranteeing you that on a monthly basis you will earn a minimum of X rand in order for you to make a profit and pay off your taxes.
So basically,
but the IPPs are guaranteed
for 20 years.
They are guaranteed for 20 years, and that guarantee is what has made it possible for the foreigners to come and say, we are establishing here with components they manufactured overseas. So as a country, we are sustaining jobs in foreign lands. we are destroying jobs in our country. Now, here is the other thing.
Before you go there, already you're going to pay this 34 billion rand by next March.
Yes, which equates to the 93,150,000 rand per day. At the end of today, the IPPs, they don't even have to have a bigger office than what you have here. All they need is a simple computer and a desk, and they will issue an invoice of 93,150,000 rand to Eskom, and Eskom is going to want to collect that money from you and I at home, and when we can't afford, we are going to be forced to go and buy coal and make mbawula.
So this 30% increase in the cost of electricity is towards subsidizing, obviously, this. But I want us to deal with the big number, 1.4 trillion rand. We are told these IPPs, this is the amount it's going to cost us. Remember when President Zuma and others were talking about nuclear energy, we're told it's too expensive, it's unaffordable, we must not do it. But now we're told, like you're saying, we're going to have to fork out 1.4 trillion rand. I mean, I've just seen we collected, for the revenue collection this year, it's about 1.8, I think, trillion, right, for the last financial year.
No, 1.256.
See, I mean, it's even lower than what we must pay these guys. This amount of money is shocking. It is bigger than the arms deal. You know, Pravin Gordhan talks about, state capture when he does, because he's protecting the big corrupt white capital. He says they think about 100 billion rand. But here we're talking 1.4 trillion rand. This must define exactly what we're saying. It's the biggest, I think we must call it robbery.
It is a colossal robbery which must be stopped. By the way, we're not saying it's acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think we are on the same page on this one.
Yeah.
Everything must be done to hold to account those that signed the Independent Power Producer Program, to hold them to account in a court of law, where they must be criminally charged. And secondly, something has to be done to cancel the Independent Power Producer Program, because the 1.4 trillion rand over the next 20 years, if you think about it, if 1.4 trillion rand came into the economy of this country over the next 20 years, what would we do? What would be the impact if 186 million rand every day came into the economy in productive sectors, whether in agriculture, whether in other industries, whether in mining? If that was the amount of money that came into the economy on a productive basis, 186 million rand every day, what would this economy look like? Now, what are we sitting with here? We are sitting with a situation whereby we are exporting capital, and the 1.4 trillion rand will average 186 million rand per day, which we are going to be giving to these privateers for doing absolutely nothing. By the way, that electricity they are producing, we do not need it. Eskom has already got enough capacity to be able to ensure that the country is fully supplied with electricity. It does not need, there's no shortage whatsoever. It is an absolute lie. Of course, the other thing that they are doing by design is by ensuring that the Eskom now, they are not operating efficiently their boilers and the energy system or the electricity system as a whole, in order to justify why we need these privateers. We do not need the privateers.
But let's come back to this. We know in the next 20 years, we're going to spend 1.4 trillion rand,
yes,
giving it to these so-called independent power producers, and also created crisis. Now, the shocking thing was, one of the first things that the regime of Cyril Ramaphosa have done was to make sure that these IPPs are signed almost immediately. Now, Jeff Radebe gone ahead, I mean, there was a court challenge and so on. What I want us first to deal with, before we talk about who, in terms of country, and if possible, in terms of companies, of the 27 IPPs benefits, let's just come back to, I don't understand the relationship between Ramaphosa as the president. Jeff Radebe is somebody who is related to him by virtue of marriage. Their brother-in-law, Motsepe, is one of the biggest beneficiaries of the these IPPs. Now, it seems to me, as a layperson, this is an immediate case of conflict of interest. Here we have the president, we have a brother-in-law You have a Minister of Energy who is also a brother-in-law to the beneficiary. Shouldn't they have declared? I mean, I'm not talking about even when you go into the 27 IPPs, we'll see there are interests that are related to Ramaphosa himself. But now we're talking about, shouldn't these have been declared that they have been complaining about families capturing the state. Does this not look like a clear case of a family, the Motsepe family, using its relationship to the president, using its relationship to the Minister of Energy to get this big, deal? Now talking about Motsepe, before you respond, I think that the Barcelona deal was part of moving our focus from this massive corruption. Because all of us love soccer, and when soccer came, we forgot to ask the big questions. But let's go back to this issue. This family, and it's one, because we talk about 27 IPP contracts. Just this one seemed to me a classical case of capturing a portion of the state by a family.
Okay, let's first maybe start this way. The biggest mischief was that, and you can clearly see that the intent was to defraud. When you look at the two acts that I referred to, the Electricity Regulation Act of 2006 as well as the National Energy Regulator Act of 2004, both of them say that before you need new capacity into the system, NERSA, which is supposed to be independent, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, it's supposed to be an independent body. It is not independent at all. It does not act in the interest of the country or of the citizens as so required in terms of law, but it is acting at the behest of those that are in power. So something has to be done about NERSA, because NERSA itself is now confirmed to have said that it will not let Eskom collapse, meaning that they are going to charge South Africans more for electricity in order to perpetuate this looting. However, they did not even follow the requirements of Section 34 of the Electricity Regulation Act, nor did they follow the requirements or the stipulations of the National Energy Regulator Act in terms of Section 10. So all the independent power producers in this country, first and foremost, are illegally signed. They are illegally charging. So in the first instance where we need to start, we need to demand without fail that because they are illegally signed, they must be reversed. And if the government itself, an ANC government, can go ahead with an illegally signed contract, what more about whereby absolutely there's no requirement for law? So they know full well, because not one of them has ever been able to produce a Section 10 decision by NERSA as required in law. Section 34 determination was set aside by the Cape High Court, and they know full well that is because they never went and engaged you and I as NERSA on whether or not we needed this type of energy and whether or not we could afford this type of energy. So they went ahead and signed it illegally. And no one has been held accountable.
You say it's because it's and also in secret because you say no one has seen this deal. In other words, what these contracts contain. These contracts which provides for guarantees, we have not seen them.
In a country with a constitution that demands transparency, particularly in matters of the public. In a country which the constitution says that the government must be transparent, we have a government that can be able to sign deals in secret, behind closed doors, and not for the citizens to know. They are making a mockery of our constitution, and the citizens of this nation need to rise up and revolt against this unlawful, unconstitutional government and constitutional conduct by government. All we are saying is that go by the law, adhere to the constitution, adhere to the laws that you have passed in parliament. You cannot go and introduce something which even if it was legal, the issue is that, is it economically viable? And the answer is that it is not economically viable. So you cannot have a situation whereby South Africans are put in a state of energy poverty. People right now, as I'm sitting with you here, because it's a cold day today, and to cook their Sunday lunch in all of the townships. What are they using? They are using mbaula. That mbaula is emitting smoke that is, at the end of the day, polluting the whole atmosphere. And our people at home, ordinary people, are now suffering from respiratory illnesses because they cannot afford.
So there are social costs, there are social costs, there are health costs. I know that, I mean, NUMSA and others have said there's 30,000 jobs which will be lost. But Brother Tsepo, 27 IPPs were signed. When I raised the issue of how Motsepe is using his familial relationships to benefit, I was told, yeah, you will be happy if the Guptas have done this. At least now it's black people who are benefiting. Why are you complaining? 27 of these. How many of these, which will cost us 1.4 trillion rand in 20 years, how many of these actually are South African contracts? And how many are foreign? Because it looked to me, Americans, Germans, everybody is in this thing except us.
The black people who are in it are France, and they know it. Let me qualify why I'm saying they are France. They are France in that all of these so-called independent power producers, they did not bring their own capital. They borrowed money from the banks. And the banks in this country, the four major banks, all of them are knee-deep to profit. Their snouts are in the trove, so to speak, if we were to use that language. Their snouts are in the trove to gain as much as they can of this money, and then they are using funds of